In today's video, we have a packed lineup of stories that hit close to home and stretches far across the globe. Straight from the headlines shaking Nigeria, the Anambra State Police has just apprehended 4 more suspects involved in the kidnap and the murder of 3 Cameroon women. And moving on, the United States just slapped sanctions on 8 Nigerians, freezing their assets over alleged links to Boko Haram, the ISIL, and serious cybercrime networks. Then shifting right back to our own backyard politics, Peter Obi dropped a powerful line that is already trending everywhere. And in Africa at large, President Tinubu is stepping on the regional stage. He just urged the immediate and unconditional release of South Sudan's first vice president, Riek Machar, and other opposition figures, pushing out for the full implementation of that revitalized peace agreement. Then zooming out to the global stage, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is in Geneva right now for the second round of high-stakes indirect talks with the United States on the nuclear issue. And finally, fresh from the Munich Security Conference, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has some strong words for America's allies in Europe. So stick with me as we unpack all of this. Now let's get into it. So just few days back, the police in Anambra State grabbed 4 more guys linked to the kidnapping and the killing of 3 women from Cameroon. These ladies came as a family. In fact, they were a family. A businesswoman named Bongo Alice, a niece Sandra, and another relative who is not named. They came to Onitsha for some business deals. The kidnappers got them, asked for ransom, but then things went horribly wrong, which eventually led to their death. I'll start from the beginning so you don't miss out on any detail at all. So back in November 2025, the 3 women came from Cameroon. They came over to Nigeria and they settled in Onitsha. There's Bongo Alice, like I mentioned earlier, Anne Sandra, and then 1 other family member. They settled in Onitsha, that's the big market spot in Anambra, just doing their usual trading stuff. And then the next thing, they got kidnapped not long after they arrived. The kidnappers called the families demanding for ransom, I think about 30 million TFA. And apparently, the family scraped together and gathered about 11 million TFA, which is roughly 19 million naira. But even after paying, they were not released. And then by the end of November, the police, with the help from drivers and then local men, pulled up 2 badly decomposed bodies out of the Omambala River in Anambra West. They figured that the bodies were 2 out of the 3 women that were missing. The 3rd one was still missing as at that point. They arrested 2 suspects earlier on, Nonso Augustine Akwe, who is currently 37, and Kingsley Akwe, who is 44. They found some weapons too, a pump-action gun and a homemade double-barreled one. The other guy got away after a shootout and was badly injured. There were 3, but 1 got away. But before we move into the recent arrest that was just made, let's watch this clip from the previous arrest.
So now here when I carry them come, Abi? Huh? Okay. How many of them?
3 of them.
Who? Now woman or a man?
Woman.
Where they from?
They say Cameroon.
Who carry them come?
Chinonso.
Chinonso? Who is Chinonso to you?
Now my brother.
How many of them do the job?
With Uche and Rambo.
That is 3 of you.
3 of you.
So the women are here. They wanna carry them come, Abi? Where the women they now?
The woman be inside this room 55. Come out to go call my brother. And I say I come back and no see them again. And I know see that Uche when they talk. That guy where they call this morning, where carry their wife come for that one station.
Okay, you've been living with Uche.
With Uche.
So since that day, you no can see them again.
Yeah.
Okay. So as it is now, are you now saying that you don't know where the 3 Cameroon women they? You don't know.
I don't know the place with them now.
Okay.
Because whether Uche don't carry them from out, I don't know.
No wahala.
Alright, so about the current arrest we're talking about now. On February 13th, the police, specifically the Rapid Response Squad out of Akuzo, got tips from the guys they already caught. They raided this spot in Nando community in Anambra East, and after a wild shootout, they arrested 4 more suspects. Chukwuemeka Emmanuel, who goes by Ugoebe Naja and is 27, he is supposedly the chief priest at some shrine tied to this kidnap. And there's also one Bune Bright, who is 27, Chinecherem Chiama, who is 21, and Michael Okunife, who is 38. They found a bunch of stuff like 2 pump-action guns, a homemade Beretta pistol, a Machar, and all sorts of charms. The police spokesman Tochukwu Ikenga said it all come from confession and solid intel, and that they are still hunting the rest of the crew, including the main boss who is currently on the run. So now that's 6 guys in total, 2 from the previous arrest and 4 from this current arrest. And currently they are all locked up and they are getting questioned. Now about that shrine thing that they saw, it has got me thinking. You hear cases in Nigeria where crime mixes with rituals or with juju to scare people and to protect the criminals. Now this just makes me wonder if there is more to this case. Although the police has not confirmed that, maybe it was just a kidnap that turned out badly. But then let's dig a bit deeper. The main reason might seem like a straight up ransom, which happens a lot in kidnap cases. But then why kill them after getting paid? Could it be that they are worried about being identified, or could it tie into that shrine stuff, something ritualistic? You know, we've seen stories about ritual killings and that Yahoo Yahoo Plus vibe, where people mix spiritual junk with scams and with crimes. Although having a so-called chief priest and those charms doesn't prove it, but then it raises a lot of questions, and questions that I hope the investigation will sort out. And we also have to give it to the Anambra cops. They stuck with it from finding the bodies to the arrest, but then it is not over. We still have some guys that are out there, maybe an even bigger network, and they need to be apprehended. But in this case also proves that the police can still get results. If they push, if they try, they can still get results. But still, without fixing the big stuffs like jobs for young people, education, making people feel hopeful, these crimes might just keep coming up. And to the families in Cameroon, we hope justice comes quick. And moving on to the next story, early this morning, Peter Obi dropped a strong message on his X handle. He wrote, "Our votes must count. Unlike in the past in 2027, our vote must count. And all those who are not there to count the votes will be counted among those destroying Nigeria. I encourage everyone to remain at the polling unit after voting to count and witness the counting and transmission of results. Those who refuse to allow the vote count will be made to count the full weight of the law against rigging. Let me reiterate, if you do not count our votes, we will count you among those who destroy our democracy, thereby destroying our future, and you must answer to the law." You see the part where he said, unlike the past. It was not just talking, no. Most of us remember in 2023, we queued for hours under the sun and even under the rain. Some people traveled from far away to vote. We trusted the system, the beavers, the IRV portal, electronic transmission. They even told us that it was going to be different. But then results started coming in funny ways. Some polling units uploaded, some people did not, some polling unit did not, some numbers did not add up, and in the end we were robbed. But then 2027 is not 2023, and that's the point Peter Obi is making. Technology has improved. We have more young people that are now awake. More of us now understand that democracy is not just voting, it's about defending your votes. And this time we are staying until the end. We are going to witness the counting, watch the transmission, we take pictures, we record videos where they are allowed. We hold everyone, every single person accountable. If you're a polling unit officer, if you're a party agent, if you're a security personnel, listen carefully. Your job is to protect the votes and not to manipulate it. See, it's not just to vote. Every vote has to count. And as a citizen, your PVC is your power. You collect it early and you guard it. On election day, you vote and you stay. You don't go home after voting. You wait for sorting, you wait for counting, you wait for announcement at your polling units. And if the results are transmitted live to the RIV, you monitor it from your phone. If something looks off, you raise alarm peacefully. We need more citizens that are going to be observing. We need young people, women, market people, teachers, everybody. Peter Obi is basically saying, we, the people, are the final INEC. When we all show up and we stay vigilant, rigging becomes very hard. You see, they can snatch boxes when thousands of people are not watching. But they cannot snatch boxes when we are watching. They can't write fake results when videos are everywhere. And let me be honest, it is not for one person alone. this is not for Peter Obi alone or for one party alone. It's about Nigeria working for once. So whether you are obedient, you are APC, PDP, ADC, whatever, if your candidate wins fair and square, you celebrate. But if they don't, you accept. But no more, they stole it in the night, they did this and they did that. Think about your children. Think about your family. Think about your friends. In 2027, many of them will be voting for the first or for the second time. Do you want them to inherit the same broken system that we've complained about for 25 years? Definitely no. So we're going to fix it now. We've had the free and fair election before, but then each time we are being disappointed. Each time the disappointment follows. And that is because many of us left after voting. We trusted the system and the system failed us. The system failed us because some people inside that system had other plans. And now it is time for mass participation, way beyond just voting. We need to be present at every very stage. See, I understand that it might be stressful and tiring for us, but then it's better to put in that work because that work reduces chances of snatching, that work reduces chances of falsification. Add real-time transmission to this and suddenly the old tricks don't work anymore. And also for security agencies watching this, you see, your job is to protect voters and not to intimidate any of them. Any officer caught aiding rigging will answer one day. It might not be today, it might not be on that day, but you answer one day. And to the politicians, if you truly believe in your message, you win by convincing people and not by buying votes or forcing results. When votes don't count, leaders don't fear the people. They do whatever they like. They borrow trillions, inflation sky high, insecurity everywhere, youths leaving the country in droves. But then we can choose a different path. A path where hard work pays, a path where security men protect instead of harass citizens, a path where hospitals work, where schools are good, where jobs exist. And we can do this for a better Nigeria. So like I said earlier, we need mass participation where everybody comes out and not just to vote, but you participate, you see it until the very end. This is exactly what Peter Obi is urging all of us to do. Our vote needs to count. And diving deep into a massive story that has just dropped. The United States has slapped sanctions on 8 Nigerians for alleged links to Boko Haram, the Islamic State in Iraq, and serious cybercrime operations. Over the weekend, the U.S. Treasury Office of Foreign Asset Control, OFAC, dropped a massive 3,000-page document updating their specially designated nationals, also known as the SDN list. In it, they named 8 Nigerians whose assets in the US or anywhere under the US control are now frozen. That means no bank accounts, no property deals, no business with Americans. They are basically cut off from the global financial system. Now you might ask why this happened. The US says these guys are tied to Boko Haram, that's the terrorist group that has been terrorizing the Northeast for years. They are also tied to the ISIL, and they are also involved in cybercrime networks. Think about romance scams, business email hacks, the kind of stuff that cost people millions of dollars and naira worldwide. Now, this is not new for the US. They've sanctioned Nigerians before for funding Boko Haram. Remember in 2022, where 6 guys got busted in the UAE for wiring money to terrorists, but although their names were not released. But then this one is bigger and it has got people talking. So let's talk about the people in question. That's the people who were busted, people whose names were released in the SDN list. We have Salih Yusuf Adamu, who was born August 23rd, 1990. Is a Nigerian passport holder, is linked to Boko Haram, and was one of the 6 Nigerians convicted in the UAE in 2022 for setting up a funding cell in Dubai. And back then, they tried to send $782,000 to Boko Haram fighters. There's also Khalid Al-Banawi, who was born in 1976 in Maiduguri, and this man is identified as a key Boko Haram leader, and his name popped up multiple times in the document. There's also Abu Abdullahi Umar Al-Banawi, also known as Ba Idrissa. He is tied to Boko Haram and the ISIL leadership. There's also Abu Musab Al-Banawi, also known as Abib Yusuf, and he is another high-level figure in the group. There's also Ibrahim Ali Al-Azan, also from the 2022 UAE case, and is convicted for helping fund Boko Haram. There's also Abu Bakr IBN Muhammad. There's also Abu Bakr IBN Muhammad Al-Mainoki. He's also known as Abu Bilal Al-Mainoki and is linked to ISIL operations. Now, the only Igbo man in this list, Nnamdi Osun Benson, born March 21st, 1987. It stands out. It was sanctioned under cybercrime rules. He's accused of being a big-time online fraudster and is also holding a Nigerian passport. And then the Yoruba man on the list, Babestan Oluwole Ademulero. It was mentioned in connection with the Boko Haram funding network. Now look at these names. They are not just random names. They are names that have been mentioned with past cases. For example, Saliu Yusuf and Ibrahim Alazan were already convicted abroad for terrorism financing. The cybercrime angle with Benton shows the US is eating both terrorism and fraud in one sweep. So now what happens? Their assets are now blocked, US citizens can't deal with them, and it could even lead to visa bans. In Nigeria, the EFCC authorities might step in, but so far there has been no comment from Abuja. Now this is very, very serious because it shows that the US sees Boko Haram funding as still active, even internationally. The cybercrime part highlights how some Nigerians are using the same networks for fraud that could overlap with terror financing. And looking at this, it's a double blow on Nigeria's image. And the reaction on social media has been hot. I'm talking massive. It's a lot, but let's take a look at a few of them. Alright, so we have this first comment from Josh. Josh said, cutting off the financial lifelines of groups like Boko Haram is just as important as the physical fight on the ground. These sanctions are a necessary step in global counter-terrorism efforts. Let's hope this leads to more transparency and cooperation in tracking these networks. I thoroughly support Josh. If you cut off their financing, you are 50% winning over these people. There's no money to finance their guns, no money to finance these arms, no money to finance the bomb and every other thing they use in terrorizing the nation. So cutting off their financial lifeline is as important as fighting them here on the ground. And there's also this comment from Ekene Fortunate. Ekene Fortunate is saying, none of them is popular in Nigeria. I guess some politicians are using them to carry out their missions, and I bet these sanctions doesn't affect them as they never go to USA, instead Saudi Arabia or Dubai. How true. There's also this from Sinzu Slim. Sinzu Slim says it's honestly infuriating. If the US can identify these individuals, freeze assets and name them publicly, why aren't Nigeria's authorities doing the same with arrests and real prosecutions? Actually, why? Sanctions are one thing, but people linked to terrorism and serious crimes shouldn't be walking free. They should be in prison facing justice. If the US can identify them, if the US can bring these people to the public, if the US can release their name, then I think the Nigerian government, the Nigerian authorities should be doing the same thing. Because these people are people that are funding a group that is constantly terrorizing us, terrorizing this country, especially in the northwest or in the northeast rather. So when you bring out the people funding them, when you bring out the big boss, they might not actually even be the big boss. Speaking about this, they might not be the big, they might just be people that the bigger boss are using as cover up. But then, as I was saying, if you can identify these individuals, if you can name them publicly, if the US rather can name them publicly, then the Nigerian authorities should focus on that, should do the same thing with the arrest. Once the US names them, the Nigerian authorities proceed with the arrest, they proceed with prosecutions. Identifying them, sanctioning their bank accounts, freezing their bank accounts is one thing. But then the main thing is that they shouldn't be walking free. The main thing is that they should be facing justice, they should be brought before the court, and they should face prosecution. Now, this next comment from Everything Politics. While combating crime is necessary, unilateral sanctions often raise questions about sovereignty. Shouldn't international justice involve multilateral processes rather than one country acting alone? Then there's this one from Josh also. It is significant to see international pressure being applied here. However, for these sanctions to have a long-lasting effect, they must be mirrored by local judicial action within Nigeria to ensure these individuals face justice where the crimes were committed. Just as I was saying, sanctioning them is not enough. Bringing them to the public is not enough. Mentioning their name is not enough. They need to be arrested. They need to face justice. They need to be prosecuted. And then this last comment from Chijoke, PhD nuclear engineering. He says US sanctions 8 Nigerians over links to Boko Haram cybercrime. In 2022, 6 Nigerians were convicted for setting up a Boko Haram cell in the United Arab Emirates to raise funds for insurgents in Nigeria. The Buhari regime refused to publish the list. Now Trump has done it. Thankfully, Trump did what the Buhari regime couldn't. Now back to our conversation. This is a lot. It's a lot, and it's progress actually, and we need more and more of this. We need these people to be brought to the public. We need them to be identified. We need their names to come out. There are still a lot of them. This is just 8 out of them. There's still a lot. I'm very certain they are more than this, way more than this, and we need more of this. We need the Nigerian authorities to look into this. We need the Nigerian authorities to make sure these people face justice. We're talking about terrorism. Terrorism has made people lose their life. Terrorism has made people lose properties. Terrorism has caused people a lot of trauma. It is doing us a lot of damage in this country. And if care is not taken, it will get even worse. Which is why we need more of this. Which is why we need these people to face justice. When we cut off their financing and then we catch the big boss, it is easier to fight these people and it is faster. We can apprehend them more faster. However, this story is still developing. We are going to be watching and we are going to be following up with any reactions from the sanctioned individuals or from the government. Like I said, the government has not released any statements yet, but when they do, expect a follow-up. And moving on, President Bola Tinubu has made a strong call for peace in South Sudan, specifically urging the immediate and unconditional release of the country's first vice president, Dr. Riek Machar, along with other key opposition figures who are currently detained. This statement came over the weekend during a high-level meeting of the African Union's Committee, often called the C5+, and this happened in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Although President Tinubu wasn't there in person, but was represented by Vice President Kashim Shettima. The summit was chaired by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and it focused on pushing forward the stalled peace efforts in South Sudan. Now, let me give you a quick background so you understand better, you understand what I'm saying better. South Sudan has been facing and has been struggling with conflict and political tension since it gained independence in 2011. There was a major civil war that started in 2013, largely between forces loyal to President Salva Kiir and those aligned with Riek Machar, who was once vice president and is from a different ethnic group and political faction. There was a peace deal signed in 2018 called the Revitalized Agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan. Now, this deal, or this agreement rather, was meant to bring stability, it was meant to form a unity government, and it was meant to lead to elections. Machar returned as first vice president under that deal. But since then, things have been very rocky. Elections have been delayed multiple times, and then there's also the latest pushback citing the need for more preparation. Recently, there have been more reports of Machar and some opposition leaders being placed under house arrest or detention amid rising tension and accusations of violating the peace terms. This has raised alarms across the region that a fragile peace could collapse, especially with elections still uncertain and humanitarian issues like food insecurity affecting millions. Now, this is where Nigerians stepped in. As a major player in African diplomacy, through the AU and its own history of mediating conflict, President Tinubu used this platform to reaffirm Nigeria's full support for getting that revitalized peace agreement fully implemented without further delays. He stressed that Nigerians stand shoulder to shoulder with other African nations in recognizing the South Sudan people's deep desire for long-lasting peace and stability. In his message delivered by Vice President Shettima, Tinubu specifically said, and I'm paraphrasing closely from reports of his statement, "We wish to specifically call on the government to consider the immediate and unconditional release from detention of the Vice President and other key opposition figures. He also pushed for all-inclusive national dialogue and reconciliation forum, urging all parties to engage constructively in mediation without setting preconditions. Now, before we proceed, let us see the clip.
Reality as we see it is that the greatest constraint to political transition in the country is the lack of political will by the stakeholders to comprehensively implement the revitalized agreement. This is why this committee should continue encouraging all South Sudanese stakeholders, particularly the current leadership of the transition government, to set aside their personal interests, place the interests of their country above all, and redouble efforts towards achieving the objectives of the transition.
The Vice President highlighted that releasing Machar and the others will be a concrete step towards rebuilding trust, de-escalating tensions, and creating space for genuine political progress. He also warned that the current path risks further instability in the country, which has already suffered so much people. We have millions displaced, we have ongoing violence in parts of the country, and there is also huge humanitarian needs. Now, this is not just Nigeria talking from the sidelines. Nigeria has been involved in South Sudan peace efforts for years. And this renewed push comes at a critical moment when the AU and regional leaders are trying to prevent a backslide. Tinubu calls alliance with broader African Union and international concerns about the detentions and the slow pace of implementing the peace deal. The chairman of the AU, who is currently the South African president, says progress since the peace agreement is slow, despite years of diplomatic engagements. Let's also see the clip.
The people of South Sudan yearn to live in a peaceful and prosperous country, and elections alone will not guarantee lasting peace. Firstly, a conducive political and security environment is vital, and it must be created.
Look, peace in South Sudan is not just a local issue, it is regional. You see, instability there affects neighbors, it drives refugee flows, it impacts the whole Horn of Africa. And Nigeria under Tinubu is making it clear. We are committed to supporting our brothers and our sisters in South Sudan to find a way forward through dialogue, through inclusion, and sticking to agreements that they've already signed. The hope is that this high-level intervention coming from President Tinubu and every other president that has spoken about it will encourage the South Sudanese government to take those steps, starting with releasing Machar and opening up real talks. Because at the end of the day, the people of South Sudan deserve a chance to build a stable and a prosperous future without a shadow of conflict hanging over them. And moving global, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has arrived in Geneva, Switzerland, ahead of the second round of indirect nuclear talks with the United States. We're talking about efforts to curb Iran's nuclear program, potentially to avert escalation in the Middle East, and maybe even open door to sanction relief that could reshape Iran's economy. He posted an X saying, and I quote, "I am in Geneva with real ideas to achieve a fair and equitable deal. What is not on the table? Submission before truth." That's a firm line for Tehran. On the US side, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said Washington is still pushing for diplomacy, with Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and even Jared Kushner, who is President Trump's son-in-law, and they are all currently heading to the talks. Oman is mediating again, just like the first round and earlier this month in Muscat. Now let's go deeper. These talks restarted in early February 2026 after a long freeze, some even call it a collapse, following past conflicts, including reports of Israeli and US strikes on Iranian sites last year. The first indirect round was February 6th in Oman. Both sides called it positive, but preliminary. Iran's deputy FM Majid Takht Ravanchi told the BBC they were moving more or less in a positive direction, but stressed it is America's court to show sincerity on sanctions. Now, about the talk. This discussion could help avoid more conflict in the Middle East, but if they fail, things could get even tenser. Iran has a nuclear program. They say it's for peaceful energy and medicine. The US, Israel, and others worry that it could lead to nuclear weapons, and Iran is currently denying that. Now, the goal of this talk is to get Iran to limit part of its program, like how much uranium it enriches, in exchange for the US lifting economic sanctions that hurt Iran's economy, things like oil sales and banking. Now, these are not face-to-face meeting. Oman is the go-between, like Oman is in the middle of this talk. The two sides now talk in separate rooms, so you understand that. The first round of this talk was February 6th in Oman. Both sides called it positive but said more work is needed to be done. Now, round 2 is in Geneva. From Iran's side, according to HaramCyber, state media, and Reuters interview, Iran is willing to cap enrichment, maybe lower back to levels like before. They are also willing to reduce some equipment, let more IAEA inspections, but only if the US fully lifts sanctions so Iran can sell oil, use banks, import things like planes or mining gears. There's been no talk about missiles or regional groups like the Hezbollah, the Houthis. Now, that is a red line. They say a good deal should help Iran's economy too, not just security for others. And from the US side, the US wants strong verifiable limits on nuclear, maybe even longer term or zero enrichment in some views. Some in Washington want to include missiles and proxy issues, but they are pushing diplomacy first, and Rubio is saying it is hard but possible. The military pressure is real. There are extra US carriers in the region, used by Iran's guards in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, HaramCyber met IAEA chief Rafael Grossi today, the 16th of February, in Geneva for technical prep. That is more important because the IAEA has questions about Iran's uranium stockpile and past sites. Now, the bottom line. Both of these countries want a deal to calm things down. But the thing is that the trust is low and the red lines are very firm. Now, the US has 2 carrier groups nearby, which is a show of strength to say, we are serious, but then we prefer talks. And Iran is also running drills in the Strait of Hormuz, that's the narrow waterway where 20% of world oil passes. It is also their way of saying we have options too if this goes bad. Now, there's no attacking yet. For now, the talks is the focus. But if a deal happens, Iran gets economic reliefs, that's cheaper food, stronger currency, more jobs, oil prices could stabilize, and it's good for everyone, including here in Lagos. There's also less risk of wider fighting in the region. But then if it fails, we're looking at more sanctions, maybe strikes on sites, higher oil prices, supply worries, tensions with Israel, Gulf states. Honestly, these talks are like a long chess game. We see slow moves, there's a lot of waiting. But then at the moment, Iranians are not taking it easy on HaramCyber. In fact, his comment section is on fire. Quickly, let's take a look at some of those comments on HaramCyber's social media post. Okay, we have this first one. The name is in Islam. We will not allow your crime to be forgotten. By the way, the issue of crime against Iran and humanity will be the most important issue, and you all must be tried. There's also this from Arishanka Shahe. It says, but due to which extent, everyone can see that the things aren't just about nukes, it is about change of regime and retainment of democracy or any other form which people of Iran prefers. But nuke deal is just a decoy, we know that. And this comment from Bob. Bob is telling HaramCyber directly that you do not represent Iranians, you need to face criminal charges. And there's this from Ernest Montgomery George. You realize we will not forgive your regime for the mass slaughter of people who are also just trying to negotiate for a different system than the one that represses and is constantly murdering and torturing them. You are part of that, and whatever happens with the negotiation, your time will still come and you'll be born in hell for everything you stand for. Some strong word. And then this comment from Anita. Fairness, a funny word for those who have the blood of over 50,000 Iranians on their hands. You are willing to commit genocide in Iran for the survival of occupying regime of the Islamic Republic. You, the officials of the Mullahs regime, are the biggest liars and criminals in human history. Making an agreement with the occupying regime of the Islamic Republic's complicity in the crimes of this regime. Then this one from Radio Palalv. I love how Trump is keeping you hopefully running in vain and finally gonna bomb all of you to hell. As La Vista Tariq Irakshi. and this from Rhetorical Archives. Trump is playing you fools and setting you up for public humiliation very soon. The tables are about to turn completely. These talks will collapse because Trump isn't interested in any genuine deal. His real art of the deal relies on B-2 bombers and drones, not diplomacy. He may come for you soon. And then finally, we have this comment from Jedbug Ops. Flirting with Trump won't get you anywhere. Now, everyone knows your only expertise are lies and cheating. Enough is enough. I think you should save your ass before it is too late. Get your family and young recent wife and run. I mean run. Really run, MF. And that's all for the comments. You see, opposition groups, dissidents, and anti-regime Iranians, both inside Iran and in the diaspora, view Arakchi as a key defender and spokesperson for the Islamic Republic repressive policies. He has publicly justified or downplayed the regime's violent crackdown on protests, like blaming external forces like the US and Israel for fueling unrest, defending the use of force, and issuing threats in Western media like the Wall Street Journal. This has made him a symbol of the regime's hardline stance for those who want regime change or greater reforms. Now, until the talk happens tomorrow, which is the 17th, there isn't much to say, but expect a follow-up immediately we get details of the meeting outcome. And finally, for today, Rubio addresses Munich security conferences, saying U.S. allies shouldn't be shackled by guilt. Rubio, speaking as Secretary of State under President Donald Trump, delivered a keynote speech that blended reassurance with firm calls for change. He emphasized the revitalized transatlantic alliance based on mutual strength, reciprocity, and pride in shared Western heritage, rather than what he described as weakness, guilt, or managed decline. The key line highlighted in the headline, U.S. allies shouldn't be shackled by guilt, comes from his direct appeal. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, people who understand we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing to defend it. Now, you might not understand what I just said now, so let's see the video in which he said this.
We do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies.
He rejected the idea of the U.S. serving as polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. He pushed for self-reliant allies with tighter borders, revived industry, national sovereignty, and control on mass migration, which he called a threat to Western civilization when unchecked. Rubio stressed that America remains deeply tied to Europe, and in his words, he says, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe, and prefers partnership over separation, but then he demanded seriousness and reciprocity. He also noted that the U.S. is prepared to act alone if needed, but then he hopes that to act together to revive the West age of dominance and renew the greatest civilization in human history. This speech received a standing ovation from many attendees, including European leaders, and was seen by some as more conciliatory than prior Trump administration tones, like J.D. Vance's remarks the previous years. However, it drew mixed reactions. we see relief from some over-reaffirmed US commitment to the alliance, but then criticism from others for its emphasis on right-wing policies like migration controls and limited mention of specific threats like the Russia-Ukraine war or China, and a MAGA-inflected worldview glorifying Western heritage without apology. You know, when an headline like that drops, it grabs attention very fast. Secretary Rubio delivered it on February 14, 2026, right in the heart of Europe at the 62nd Munich Security Conference. This annual event is where defense ministers, foreign leaders, and experts hash out global threats, and it's been going on since the Cold War era. And Rubio, in his first big appearance there as Secretary of the State, chose words that echo President Trump's America First approach, but with a somewhat softer delivery than we've had before. Rubio was clear the US isn't walking away. Instead, he said, an end for transatlantic era is neither our goal nor our wish. He reminded everyone, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe. America wants reciprocity, serious partners who meet defense spending commitments, and people who align on values. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship. He spent time on migration as a civilizational threat when it is uncontrolled. And he also urged Europe to adopt stronger policies. Then he highlighted Europe's Christian foundations and cultural legacy that shaped the US, and in his statement he was unapologetic, praising Western empire roles in history without dwelling on colonial guilt. He said the West drift isn't inevitable, and it's from policy choices that Trump admins aims to reverse. The room gave him a standing ovation. You see, many European leaders, they seemed relieved. There was no direct attack on NATO or Ukraine aid courts that was mentioned explicitly. Some people called it a reassuring message compared to past tones, but then others noted omissions like the Russia-Ukraine or the China threats. Critics says it pushes MAGA views conflicting with Europe worldviews, and there have been private skepticism reported about whether this leaves rooms for Europe priorities. Now, this builds on Trump's first-term demands for fair burden sharing. Remember his NATO criticism? Rubio softened it but kept the core. Contrast with last year's Vance speech, which was more confrontational. Now, this feels like diplomacy with spine. Rubio said that the US prefers partnership but is ready alone if needed. Europe faces pressure to step up militarily, economically, and culturally, and for NATO, it signals continued US commitment but with expectations. And with that, we have come to the end of today's broadcast. I'm very certain you enjoyed every bit of it because today was really, really packed. Starting off with the Cameroonian women who were murdered and kidnapped in Anambra, down to Peter Obi's electoral reform, to Tinubu interfering in Sudan, and to more and many more global news. And with that, I believe today has been very, very packed, entertaining, educative, and very informative for you, our listeners. Now, if you have any opinion on what we talked about today, please drop in the comment section as we are going to be reading every single comment. And now, do not forget to like this video, do not forget to drop a comment, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel. It helps us to grow. Also, do not forget to turn on the notification button so you'll be one of the first people to get a notification whenever we drop a new video. Also, do not forget to share this video to your friends, to your loved ones, or to anybody that might find the information in this group very educating. And I'm your host for today, Chinyere, and this is Waywayves.